partisan films were, in a way, had an artistic element in themselves. The thing is that Slovenia is rather a small country, and there were not many films made in Slovenia because not very huge market and so on. So basically, in average, there were perhaps two feature films made every year in Slovenia. So since the government sponsored these films, it insisted that at least some of these films had to be on the topic of partisans. So which meant that several good directors did not have any choice but to shoot partisan films. But in order to keep their artistic integrity, to experiment and so on, they included these more artistic elements in these films. Another thing which distinguishes Slovene partisan films from other partisan film productions in former Yugoslavia is that they had a strong theatrical or literary note. Again, this is some kind of cultural specific of Slovenia. The fact that Slovenia, historically, in Slovenia, culture is very important. The reason for that is one argument of one cultural theorist is because Slovenians were always, or for centuries, part of the Austrian Empire and so on, they were not allowed to have their political institutions, their army and so on. So the only field that they could express themselves was culture. Slovene partisan films typically focus on individual, on his dilemmas, his existential fears, his uncertainties and so on. But another distinguishing feature is that in Yugoslav partisan films, the hero, whether it is collective or individual, which always stands for a collective, he's always already a ready-made hero. The films begin with some problem, and this hero, he has to solve this problem, he has to, destroy Germans, whatever. In Slovene partisan films, the situation is typically different. Hero, he first has to develop his idea. He has to choose the partisans in the first place. He's not certain that partisans are the good side. Also, there are not many, actually there are no spectacular battles in Slovene partisan films. They are always focused on individuals, their moral struggles and so on. Whereas in Yugoslav productions, they are typically very spectacular actions with lots of fighting, lots of people involved and so on. It might be argued that basically we have two different periods. Up to late 1960s, Slovene partisan heroes are typical heroes. They are, a little bit older, they're typically male, they are determined, they are, courageous and so on. But after late 1960s, they get increasingly younger, confused, indecisive. They don't know about, not really sure about being the partisans at all and so on. Collaborators are typically represented in negative ways. They are cowards, typically. They do not look healthy. They're always, very skinny or very fat. They typically drink. Partisans never drink. Also, it is very Home Guards and MVSA are typically represented as always, very willingly, very willingly supporting Germans and Italians. So again, it is emphasized in a way that they are collaborators. As I said, in fact, they were collaborating, but that their collaboration was in fact very reluctant. They were basically pro-Western. Basically, the heroes are still male. They take the crucial decisions and so on. But on the other hand, we have female characters which are not necessarily just sidekicks. In many instances, they are the heroes. They make the crucial moves that enable partisans to win. In a way, they also represent the Slovenianness as such. So typically, the symbols of Slovenians, which is in symbolic way again important. Even further, another thing, it is typically, or in many instances, I said in many Slovene partisan films, the heroes are indecisive, not really sure if they want to join partisans and so on. In many instances, it is then women who, pushed the characters. From 1945 to 1989, there were made some 30 partisan films. If we look at these films, our first impression will be that these films are, just ideological. They just want to, to legitimize communism, the communist struggle during the World War, and so on. The thing is that this communist uprising during the World War II in Slovenia was not very clean, in a way. So there were lots of problems with this after the World War II. Not only that partisans, the communists who organized the partisan resistance to German and Italian occupation, used that so that after the war they took the power with no elections and so on. It was in a way a form of social revolution, which is not necessarily bad. But the greater problem was that after the war, they basically brutally massacred all the prisoners from the other side. Namely, in Slovenia was very divided on this partisan struggle during the World War II. Some were for the active fight against the occupation, but also many people in Slovenia felt that it was unnecessary, that it was impossible, and so on. So they started to fight actually against the partisans. So during the World War II, what actually happened in Slovenia, but in many instances also in former Yugoslavia, was not just struggle against foreign occupation, but very bloody civil war. These films are ideologically, how should I put it, very clear and clean only at the beginning. So the early partisan films in 1940s, 1950s, early 1960s, we have this black and white situation where the partisans are good and the Germans are bad, and the home traitors like Home Guards and MVIC are totally bad and mean and so on. But after that, from late 1960s on, the situation then gradually changes. So we have films that start to include much more complex situation. So now we can see that partisans in these new films, partisans are not necessarily that good. Typically, they're becoming increasingly confused, disorientated. They're not really sure that they want to support partisans and so on. In some instances, heroes do not decide at all. And in some way, this tradition of more unconventional partisan films with these subversive meanings culminate in 1980 with a film that we will look at later on. It's Farewell Until the Next War. This film is from 1980. It was made in the context of punk movement. I don't know how much you know about that, but in Slovenia, for some reason, it's not very clear why, punk movement was extremely strong. There were many subcultures before. There were very strong hippie movement in the late 60s, rockers and so on. But from 1977 on, there was extremely strong punk movement in Slovenia. For some reason, it might be that it was the only thing that was happening. It was, there were just official celebrations and so on. But young people, they had no possibility how to make fun, how to enjoy themselves and so on. So then punk came, and there was really strong support, not only among young people, but also among artists, intellectuals, and so on. It was really it shook the system.